Hello friends. Welcome to my channel and welcome to a video in the history of British literature where I'm looking at main points of each age. I'm Sarah Mahmood and today we will discuss second part of Middle English Age, which is also known as Age of Chaucer or Chaucerian Age. If you like the video, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Let's discuss the historical background first. So the first historical event that happened was 100 Years' War. It was a series of small wars that happened between a period of 100 years. It was a series of armed conflicts between the kingdoms of England and France during the late Middle Ages. We all know that England lost at the Battle of Hastings, and because England always wanted to win his empire back, they fought against France. A war was fought which was won by England by using longbow method. So they used long bows to defeat the army of France. Another important event that took place was Black Death or Black Famine. The Black Death was a devastating global epidemic of plague that struck Europe and Asia. In the mid-1300s, plague is a serious bacterial infection that's transmitted primarily by fleas. It killed about 75 million people, including 30 to 60% of the population in Europe. Then there was a famine that occurred thrice and in just 5 years from 1347 to 1351. Because of the famine, 1/3 of the European population was dead. In Europe, the plague was particularly devastating because the famines and food shortages had resulted in weakened immune systems, making people more susceptible to illness. In this situation, when the peasants were dying because of the plague and hunger, there was a huge increase in land tax to fund the wars. Peasants were really upset with this situation and they started a rebellion which was named as Peasants' Revolt. It was led by the important personality Wat Tyler, who was protesting against the third poll tax imposed by the nobles and the ruling government to recover their 100-year war expenditure. Tyler was killed and the revolt was ended, but later government troops toured the villages hanging men who had taken part in the revolt. Although the revolt was defeated, its demands, less harsh laws, money for the poor, freedom and equality, all became part of democracy in the long term, making Wat Tyler an important figure in the history. Now let's discuss the literary characteristics of this age. First is the romances. The most important and popular form of literature during the Middle English period was the romances. These romances were mostly borrowed from Latin and French sources. Common elements of medieval romance include chivalry, courtly love, religious piety, adventure, magical elements and fantastical antagonists. I've already made a video on this topic which you can watch for better understanding. The link is given in the description. Next we have the miracle and morality plays. In the Middle English period, miracle plays became very popular, also known as mystery plays. You can see in the pic is a theatre where these plays were performed. From the growth and development of the Bible story, scene by scene, carried to its logical conclusion. This drama developed to an enormous cycle of sacred history, beginning with the creation of man, his fall and banishment from the Garden of Eden, and the dead on the day of final judgment. This kind of drama is called the miracle play, sometimes less correctly the mystery play, and it flourished throughout England from the reign of Henry II to that of Elizabeth. Another form of drama which flourished during the Middle Ages was the morality plays. Morality plays are a type of drama that features allegorical stories to teach a moral message by way of various Christian symbols and teachings. In these plays the uniform theme is the struggle between the powers of good and evil for the mastery of the soul of man. These plays were performed to teach the humankind the difference between wrong and right. It was, in fact, Chaucer who was the real founder of English poetry, and he is rightly called the father of English poetry, unlike the poetry of his predecessors and contemporaries, which is read by few except professed scholars. Chaucer's poetry has been read and enjoyed continuously from his own day to this, and the greatest of his successors, from Spenser and Milton to Tennyson and William Morris, have joined in praising it. Chaucer, in fact, made a fresh beginning in English literature. He disregarded altogether the Old English tradition. His education as a poet was twofold. Part of it came from French and Italian literatures, but part of it came from life. He was not a mere bookman, nor was he in the least a visionary. Like Shakespeare and Milton, he was, on the contrary, a man of the world and of affairs. The most famous and characteristic work of Chaucer is the Canterbury Tales, which is a collection of stories related by the pilgrims on their way to the shrine of Thomas Becket at Canterbury. These pilgrims represent different sections of contemporary English society. All these characters are individualized, yet their thoroughly typical quality gives unique value to Chaucer's picture of men and manners in the England of his time. The Canterbury Tales is a landmark in the history of English poetry because here Chaucer enriched the English language and metre to such an extent, that now it could be conveniently used for any purpose. Moreover, by introducing a variety of highly finished characters into a single action, and engaging them in an animated dialogue, Chaucer fulfilled every requirement of the dramatist, short of bringing his plays on the stage. Also, by drawing finished and various portraits in verse, he showed the way to the novelists to portray characters. Gower occupies an important place in the development of English poetry. Though it was Chaucer who played the most important role in this direction, Gower's contribution cannot be ignored. His important works include Confession Amantis, which is in the form of conversation between the poet and a divine interpreter. It is an encyclopedia of the art of love, and satirizes the vanities of the current time. Throughout the collection of stories which forms the major portion of Confession Amantis, Gower presents himself as a moralist. Moralist is a person who promotes morality. Though Gower was inferior to Chaucer, it is sufficient that they were certainly fellow pioneers, fellow schoolmasters, in the task of bringing England to literature. One of the greatest poets of the Middle Ages was William Langland, and his poem, A Vision of Piers the Ploughman, holds an important place in English literature. In spite of its archaic style, it is a classic work in English literature. This poem, which is a satire on the corrupt religious practices, throws light on the ethical problems of the day. The character assumed by Langland is that of the prophet, denouncing the sins of society and encouraging men to aspire to a higher light. He represents the dissatisfaction of the lower and the more thinking classes of English society, as Chaucer represents the content of the aristocracy and the prosperous middle class. After Chaucer there was a decline in English poetry for about 100 years. The years from 1400 to the Renaissance were a period bereft of literature. There were only a few minor poets, the imitators and successors of Chaucer, who are called the English and Scottish Chaucerians, who wrote during this period. The main cause of the decline of literature during this period was that no writer of genius was born during those long years. Chaucer's successors were Accleve, Lydgate, Hawes, Skelton, Henryson, Dunbar and Douglas. They all did little but copy him, and they represent an era of mediocrity in English literature that continues up to the time of the Renaissance. That was all for Middle English period. If you have any question regarding this topic you can ask in the comment section. Thanks for watching.